Hello, hello, let's get this on the road. Alright, so I'll get my lovely little thing showing up there in a second, but in the meantime, hey, how's it going? I hope it's been well for you guys. So I really like doing the one that I did for PAX Australia, and I thought, hey, why don't I do something like that again? So that's exactly what I've done. Let me just get it all up nice and running. In hindsight, probably should have done this, but hope you're all doing well. Let's see if I can get this looked at. Okay. I think I've got it all good. So let's get right to it. So, hello everyone. Hope you're really enjoying today's stream. But I'm very excited to talk about this. I'm a big Doctor Who fan, and I have a lot to talk about in the realm of Doctor Who. For those that are not aware, I used to do a Doctor Who podcast back in the day, many years ago. But I'm still very passionate about the show, for better or for worse. Some would say worse nowadays, but them's the breaks. But yeah, I just kind of want to give my brand new perspective as a fan from Australia. You know, a lot of the Doctor Who fans are from the UK, so yeah, what's it like on the other side of the world? Well, we're going to talk about it. Alright, so let's get to it. So, Doctor Who and Australia from 1965 to 2004. So I'm going to be bringing up a channel called the ABC. It is not the American ABC. It is in reference to the Australian Broadcasting Corporation, which is a free-to-air channel that is funded by the government. They first broadcasted Doctor Who, the Hartnell era specifically, in January 1965, making Australia one of the first countries to do so, which I think is a really cool honour. As such, some of the early footage from William Hartnell's serials kind of only exist because the ABC had some pretty strict censorship laws back in the day. And so some of those scenes that got cut from the final viewings are the only bits that now exist, which is kind of funny in hindsight, you know. The only the non-TV allowed clips being some of the only stuff that now exists of his era is very kind of funny. One thing that I didn't actually know until I started doing research for all of this is that they would help co-fund the Five Doctors, which was the 20th anniversary story back in '85. Which again I never knew. Like I knew that the ABC and BBC were close, but I never really knew that they were, you know, that kind of close. And then what I found quite interesting when I was looking into the ABC's programming of the show back during the classic era is that they would kind of air a few months after they did in the UK, which was pretty much for the norm back then. You know, obviously it wasn't like nowadays where it's like instantaneous. You kind of had to wait for the shows to be brought over here. So yeah, a few months isn't too bad. But what I did find kind of cool is that they also aired the telemovie. But not only did it get televised, it also got a theatrical release, which I thought was pretty neat. Its premiere was at Planet Hollywood Sydney. It no longer exists, but from what I've been told by people that did used to go there, it was kind of a big deal. So yeah. So I'm gonna put this into three chunks essentially. So part one is kinda everything up until Whovians. And for those that aren't aware, we'll get to Whovians, but it was kind of an important part of Australia Doctor Who. So yeah, so part one is just kind of everything leading up to that moment. Um, so if we're looking at the revival's early years, so series one would air on the Saturday, the 21st of May 2005, and it'll be the 7:30 p.m. prime time slot, which would be 2 months behind the UK, which was probably the closest that it was at the time. I couldn't get complete data as to how far behind the classic serials would be, but to what I understood, it was like 3 to 4 months. So 2 months behind the UK was the best that it's gotten up until that point. But the Saturday schedule was kind of very good for the show at the time, because to give you an understanding as to Australian scheduling, it will be important later. Saturday and Sunday is kind of optimal for anything that isn't um, Australian made programming. Australian made programming kind of dominates the weeknights. So if you want any chance of exposure, Saturday and Sunday is your best bet. Um, what I did find very interesting though was that the Christmas Invasion, which was the 2005 Christmas special, wouldn't air until the week prior to the start of the following season. So Series 2 aired on the 15th of July, so Christmas Invasion would appear the week before that. And I get it on one hand, if there's a bit of a lead in from the Christmas special to the new season. Kind of makes a bit of sense, but still, that means that an episode that came out in December, you still had to wait 7 months from the Christmas special airing in the UK to when the ABC chose to air it um, just before Series 2, which already was 3 months behind the UK. So, hence the name playing catch up, because that's kind of what it was in the early days. Obviously, there was no real social media presence for that to really be an issue, but I just kind of found that fascinating. And it's not something that was just singular to the Christmas Invasion, because they did it for both The Runaway Bride, which was the 2006 special, and Voyage of the Damned, which was the 2007 special. Yeah, Series 3 kind of followed the same thing of being just under 3 months behind the UK. But then we get to Series 4. And Series 4 is kind of interesting because they changed it from Saturdays, which had been the case for the past 3 years, and now moving it to Sundays for some reason. Not too sure what really caused that change. When I was doing my research, nothing really came up in regards to justifying those kind of changes, but yeah, it's going to be something that's going to be interesting, a bit of a back and forth between Saturday and Sunday. So then we get to iView. So the ABC would release their streaming platform, I guess is the right word. It was kind of like their catch-up service. So all of their programming, regardless of if it was Australian made or overseas stuff, would go onto that service. And it was kind of during the time that high definition started to become into play. For us, it was about 2009 to 2010 was when we really moved away from standard definition to high definition. Despite the fact that Series 4 aired at the same time that Ivy got introduced, it wouldn't come a factor until 2009 with The Next Doctor, which, to be fair, was kind of a big deal, because I think the ABC really wanted to push iView by being like, look, here it is, it's going to be 1 month behind the UK, or as they called it, fast-tracked, airing exactly 1 month from the Christmas special, which again, means that this is now the shortest time span between UK release and Australian broadcast. So, yeah. Just thought that was kind of interesting that that's what they did. But then kind of reverted back a bit. If we look at the rest of the specials, like Planet of the Dead would be a month after the UK. Waters of Mars was the first time that it aired actually within a month for some reason. But then we got The End of Time Part 1 and 2. And right, so how it originally worked was it was the Christmas special and then the New Year's Day special. So you'd be thinking, well, if you're pushing it back later, why wouldn't you just air both of those specials back to back? But no, they decided, hey, Valentine's Day and the week after Valentine's Day is the perfect time to release those episodes. So, yeah, I don't know. As I said, this is part of the whole weird ABC scheduling that I never truly understood. But yeah, so as we can tell now, Sunday seems to be the norm for um, scheduling Doctor Who after 3 years of Saturday. Now we've gone 2008 to 2010, all being Sunday. I hope that doesn't change anytime soon. So then we get to Series 5. Series 5 reduced the gap to 2 weeks, being aired on Sunday, April 2010, with each of those episodes airing 2 days prior on the iView platform. So, and that would kind of be how it would normally work from here on out. It would air on iView before it would get the TV release. Then we get to A Christmas Carol, which marked a very important milestone for broadcasting in Australia because it would air on Boxing Day, which is, Christmas Day, but our time zone, right? So now we have the gap reduced to a day. And it's kind of the first of a tradition that would exist all the way up until 2017. So, a 7-year tradition is pretty good for considering what scheduling has happened in the past. Yeah, so I'm just reading it and it pisses me off already. Series 6 reverted back to Saturday night scheduling for some reason. It would only be a 6-day gap, which better than usual, but it's still kind of funny that they've really condensed the gap, but now they've changed the date back again. I'm sorry. So hey, Saturday nights, that's what it is, right? Then we get to Series 7 Part 1. So these are the 2012 episodes. They would now be released on iView minutes after they aired in the UK, which is something that they did do all the way up until the end of the Jodie era. So, I think that was one of the best parts about iView was just the fact that you get that fast-tracked almost instantaneously. Again, this was when social media started to become more and more of a presence, so it was kind of more and more important that fans, got more closer access, so they kind of could be, in the conversation in a way. Yeah, so what they would do, they would air the episodes minutes after they did in the UK, and then they would air the episodes on ABC themselves the following Saturday. And then, in 2013, they reverted back to Sunday. To be fair, now it airs within a day of the UK, compared to the 6 days that it used to be, but if you're already getting confused and a little frustrated, kind of imagine what it's like for us. That is the TLDR, which we will get to by the end of this, is just that if you're struggling to follow this, welcome to our world. Anyway, so Series 7 Part 2, the 2013 episodes, would now be within a day of the UK, but now it is moved back to Sunday. And this is something that they would continue until 2017. But that being said, this kind of time period, it was the 50th anniversary, and they really kind of wanted to like have the big screen really play more of a presence, and it's something that I really kind of loved, and I really wanted to like just to delve a little bit into this section because I kind of miss it, and I kind of want to see them bring it back. So in 2013, as part of the 50th anniversary celebrations, they did a test run cinema release of the Series 6 two-parter Impossible Astronaut and Day of the Moon. I went to go see it, absolutely loved it. Again, they should do it more often. Um, but then, obviously, that would lead into November, where they did that big whole simulcast between um, the TV airings and the cinema release showings of the Day of the Doctor. It was that big Guinness World Record feat that they did. Big deal. I don't mean that sarcastically. I don't mean that sarcastically. I mean that genuinely. Like, it was a big deal. Like it was the talk of the town. Um, and then because of those successes, we got to see a bunch of episodes get simulcast releases. Deep Breath was a big one because of the whole world tour thing they were doing. One of my biggest regrets, not gonna lie. Really wish that I got to see that, but alas, I was a bit young for that. And then they did a bunch of Christmas specials. I definitely remember Return of Dr. Mysterio being one of them. Uh, and then we get to the last one that they did, which was... See, here's the thing. I wrote 2019 there because I'm an idiot. It's the 2018 episode Woman Who Fell to Earth. Just ignore the little mistake there. Just pretend it doesn't exist. But yeah, Woman Who Fell to Earth was the last time they did a simulcast release. And it's been 8 years since then. And that sucks. Because I think one of the coolest events, like one of the coolest parts, is seeing Whovians get together, to really celebrate the show as a whole, when there are exciting moments that gets the crowd amped, I want to be part of that. And that kind of leads into Whovians. So, Whovians is kind of a very special thing, as I was saying at the beginning of this this presentation of sorts. But what is Whovians? So, Whovians was kind of a panel after show that existed in front of a live studio audience, and the idea is that the audience would watch the episode because obviously the episodes would air on TV that night, but not everyone was guaranteed to have watched it on Ivy or however they watched the show. So what they would do is that they would air the show before the taping, just to really kind of get the audience feel as to how they reacted to the episode, and they would kind of like feed off that energy, which I thought was really cool. But yeah, the idea is that so you had 4 people on these seats, and they would dissect each of the episodes, try to theorize what's going on ahead of time, and talk about the history if they bring back an old villain or whatever. It was just kind of cool stuff like that. It would be hosted by Rove McManus, who, as it right there, is the 3-time Gold Leggy winner, which is kind of like the biggest event, the biggest award in Australian television, right? So that kind of goes to show, like, already we have the basis of like a cool ass platform. And then we bring in 2 comedians and another television presenter, and all of them are kind of like Whovians. And it's not like you could tell that they have such a love and a passion for the show. Tegan herself is literally named after the companion. Like that goes to show like how in-depth Whovians these guys are. The idea though is that it would be aired on the sister channel, ABC2, or I think at the time it was called like ABC Comedy. I think nowadays it's called ABC TV Plus or something like that. I don't really remember. It's ABC2. It's the secondary ABC program, and the idea is that you would watch the episode on the ABC, and then ABC2 right after would be the Whovians episode. It went for 3 seasons from 2017, looking at Series 10, until 2020, looking at series 12. Um, the important thing, though, I kind of want to emphasize, though, is that each episode is filmed, edited, and released on the same day, which kind of worked when it was a 7:30 p.m. showing of Doctor Who, and then 8:30 p.m. being when Whovians um, is released. Um, yeah, so Whovians is kind of a big deal for me, but it's one thing for me to say that it's a big deal, but then it's kind of another thing for someone else to say it. After all, this show is called Whovians, and I am just one Whovian, so let's go and talk to another Whovian and find out what they thought of the show. Take it away.
Hello, my name is Crispy, and I was part of the audience for Whovians. Whovians was one of the coolest things that Australian Doctor Who has ever done, in my opinion. Especially when it first came on the scene for series 10, it was just exciting. It was just a really genuinely exciting thing that something in Australia was happening for Doctor Who. I don't think an Australian centric Doctor Who thing has happened for a while since Whovians finished up around series 12, which is very sad. Um, but I very much enjoyed being a part of the audience of Whovians. It was pretty cool, not only because you got to see a Doctor Who talk show, but you kind of got to see like a real TV set. You got to go behind the scenes at the ABC studios down in Sydney. And I'm not from Sydney, so I would fly to Sydney every now and then. Well, I have some family and friends that live near Sydney, so I'll go and see them, and then we would go and go and see the Whovians show. But I mean, it was just so cool to see the whole behind the scenes. And something I don't think people really talk about is that the whole audience actually got to go and watch the episode before it aired, usually. Or like the day, I can't remember. I feel like for Twice Upon a Time, you got to watch it. We watched it a couple days before Christmas, which was pretty cool. But they cut it off just before Jodie Whittaker's regeneration, which was annoying. But of course, they had to keep that a secret. But yeah, you just got to watch a Doctor Who episode with an audience of Whovians, which was unreal. I've never been able to watch something like that, apart from the 50th in cinemas, I suppose. But that was really, really nice and very, very special. And then immediately afterwards, you get to watch these talk show personalities dissect the episode that you just watched, and they have all kinds of goofs and gags and cutaway segments. It was really, really special, and it was a nice initiative for something Australian, but with Doctor Who, because Doctor Who and Australia have such a unique history together. I believe that was an Australian composer who did the Doctor Who theme. There's all these kind of weird little connections to Australia, and Whovians was just one of them. I was fortunate enough to actually interview Rove and a few of the people that were on for the episode. I believe it was Pyramid at the End of the World for Series 10. And so I got to interview, Rove McManus, Tegan Higginbotham, who else? Adam Richard, of course. Adam Richard is now, I've talked to Adam Richard quite a few times. I believe he was a key host for Whovians, except for the last series, I believe. But yeah, I was able to interview them. They were very nice. I was able to talk to someone at the ABC being like, hey, I've got this little YouTube channel where I talk about Doctor Who and stuff. Is there any chance we could, make it happen? And it looked like it wasn't going to happen for a second, but they were like, oh no, you're in Sydney. We'll make something happen. We'll make something happen. And they did. And I look back at those interviews now, and they're very fun. They're very adorable. But I mean, it had 3 glorious seasons, so I think that's nothing to shy away from. Like that's pretty impressive, especially for an ABC program. And I feel like there's very little funding in TV these days, and so it's nice that we did get 3 full seasons. And I wonder if it was purely because of the the 2020 virus that Whovians couldn't return for Flux, and they were like, no, we're not necessarily prioritizing the Doctor Who talk show right now. There's other things going on. But But I mean, Whovians will always hold a very special place in my heart. I mean, like I got to hang out with so many friends, yourself. Like there's, it was just nice to do something really nerdy, and it felt official. It felt like you were in on this little club. It was basically a Doctor Who fan meet and greet every single time. Um, just meeting like-minded individuals. We can dissect the episodes ourselves after the episode. Um, and yeah, I don't know what the future of Doctor Who in Australia looks like, because I mean, even with the Disney Plus deal, Whovians couldn't have come back because Doctor Who wasn't on the ABC at all. That deal ended with the Power of the Doctor back in 2022, so it wouldn't have existed, which is a shame. Um, but hey, Disney Plus isn't involved anymore. Maybe Whovians can come back. Who knows? But I think it was I think it was a successful experiment. It probably wasn't the ratings darling that they wanted, but I think it had 3 seasons. It had a fantastic lineup, and Rove I think is So it's nice that he's a passionate fan. He's a well-known person in Australia, but he's actually a passionate fan about Doctor Who, which I think is pretty damn cool. And he was very very generous with his time when I was able to speak to him. But yeah, I loved Whovians. It was awesome. It was awesome, and it should come back. Bring Whovians back. Hashtag bring Whovians back. Thank you.
So, big special thank you to Crispy Pro for taking his time to contribute to this lovely little project of mine. If you ever want to catch his YouTube stuff, he releases videos weekly? Question mark. But yes, I will link to his channel in the description below. I don't. It's funny for me saying that, considering the discrepancy in YouTube followers. But yes, do go follow Crispy on YouTube. He also does a podcast called Who's There, which he does with Red Archer Live. Please go watch that. It's an absolute fantastic podcast. Yeah, and again, thank you for your time, Crispy. I couldn't really have said that better myself. I just kind of want to elaborate on a few of the things that he said. Yeah, so, yeah, the Twice Upon a Time, it's the only time that we actually got to see a Christmas special, like, in the studio. That's the only time they ever did one for any of uh, the Christmas New Year things. It was the only other time they did that. Yeah, and how it worked was that we had to sign an NDA, and we got access to the entirety of the episode up until the actual regeneration from Capaldi to Whitaker. Yeah, it was really really cool. Uh, yeah, and I think that he's right. I think what I think was really cool about Whovians was the fact that people were so willing to dress up, and just see the different costumes that people would wear. You had, I remember in like the first season, someone dressed up as a Cyberman. That was kind of nuts. But obviously, people were dressed up as doctors, companions, and they would be in the heat quite a lot because of the timing of these episodes. Often were during the hot months, so yeah, it wasn't ideal. It was very sweaty, but everyone just kind of came together because it was just such a fun time. Um, we often chatted before and after the show itself. Sometimes after the show, we would actually get to take photos. Uh, do like I mean in particular. Sorry, I'm just kind of reminiscing in a way, but some of my favorite people that I got to actually meet for the first time, Rove in particular. I also got to do an interview with him, um, which was a big deal because I didn't really know if that was ever going to happen. But I very much appreciate the time that he took to do that interview for this little Doctor Who podcast back in the day. Um, Barjo is always incredible. Um, such energy. Tegan, she's very fun. Adam is just Adam is chaos. There was one particular segment, and I still kind of have it. It's so what people would do in the audience was that Adam would give theories about how the show, like what would happen later on in the series, and if we thought that the theory was valid, we would hold up either like a valid or spray him, like someone sprayed him with like a water bottle. It's really funny. Um, and at the end of the first season, Rove gave me and a few others a special thank you card for appearing. Um, and yeah, it was just kind of like that real intimate kind of fan club, as he put it. You know, it was just kind of a really special thing, and you kind of felt that, especially in that first season. Um, as I said, all of those hosts I got to meet, and they were all fantastic. But then I got to meet other guests that appeared on the show that I've always wanted to meet for a long time. Got photos, did chatting, stuff like that. Yeah, it was just very, very, very special, and that's kind of the main reason why I wanted to discuss this, because I feel like it was kind of a forgotten era of Doctor Who because of how Australian it really was. So yeah. Anyway, let's move on. So of course, Whovian Series One, as I mentioned earlier, Doctor Who aired on 7:30, and Whovians itself was on 8:30, and it kind of felt like it was the most symbiotic between um, the Doctor Who management at the time under Stephen Moffat and the ABC itself. And you can kind of tell that because there were a lot of interviews that we managed to get throughout those episodes, whether they be actors. I do believe Peter Capaldi, Pearl Mackie, both were interviewed. Um, the writers, Sarah Dollard was a big deal. Okay, that was kind of the thing. Series 10 kind of had a bit of a weird Australian association, like its appearance in the pilot. Sarah Dollard wrote Thin Ice for that season, and she'd previously wrote Face the Raven, which was kind of a big deal. Um, and then we actually had the director, Daniel Nettheim. He did Extremis and Pyramid at the End of the World. So it was really cool actually getting to speak to him personally, like actually in the studio audience, like the process of actually directing a Doctor Who episode was kind of a really cool thing. Kind of really got to get the behind the scenes elements. But I believe they also interviewed Mark Gatiss and Stephen himself. So yeah, it just kind of really felt like we got to really see behind the curtain in a way, you know. Bro kind of asked the questions that you would want to get answered. Obviously, those were pre-recorded interviews prior to the filming of the show, but it kind of really worked seamlessly in a way. But yeah, I just kind of really loved that there was that collaboration of sorts. And then the other thing that really comes to mind, which I mentioned in there, is that there was a big ABC presence in one of the segments where, obviously, at the time we didn't know who was going to be the 13th Doctor until Wimbledon, so, you know, everyone was putting in like fake 13 Doctor ink, like audition tapes, and I thought that was really funny. But it was just kind of stuff like that, you know. They kind of really threw stuff at the wall to see what stuck, and yeah, I just while I appreciate all three seasons, it's hard not to deny how fun and memorable the first season was in particular. Purely because I think that again, it was that collaboration between Doctor Who itself and Whovians, you know, that kind of made it all work together. Um, but now we kind of have to talk about how things are changing. And I know that's a lot of text there, so I'll kind of elaborate. But basically, Doctor Who decided to um, be run under Chris Chibnall, and as a result, they decided that the show would air for the first time ever in 50 whatever years it was. They would air on Sundays. over in the UK, which is bad for us because of time zones. So now the ABC faced a dilemma. Do you A, try and air the episode on Monday to maintain the same day status that they've had for the past 5 years, or do you go back to 2012 and release it on iView and then air it the weekend after? They chose poorly. So, as I was saying beforehand, where Saturday and Sunday kind of really worked well for any non-Australian programming, when you're competing on the weeknight, you're kind of screwed. And this was most definitely the case for the ABC. Because unlike Saturday and Sunday, where you can get that prime time scheduling, by choosing to air it on Mondays, there was a very limited time slot that you could either work with. Because for the ABC, their institution for the past 20 years was the 7 p.m. news, 7:30, which was kind of also news related, and then you had Four Corners and Australian Story. That was never going to change. They were never going to accommodate Doctor Who by changing a 20-year schedule. So, it was either going to be before or after, and no way in hell was it going to be airing at 9 p.m. at night. So, they had the unfortunate thing of choosing Monday 5:55 p.m., which was never going to work because not only are you now, by avoiding the 7:30 p.m. time slot, which is the prime time, that's the slot you want, right? Now instead of competing with that time slot, you're competing with the actual most watched time slot, which is the 6 p.m. news time slot. And yeah, ratings kind of suffered as a big result. Obviously, ratings aren't everything, and it was already kind of a decline, and there are factors such as streaming and, you know, free to air kind of dying. But again, Doctor Who has been an institution on the ABC for the past 50 something years, right? And now you're changing it in a way that people can't even watch the show because a lot of people are coming home during that time, that you've just kind of alienated a lot of the fan base that you've already had by putting it at a schedule that was never going to work for it. And yeah, now you've got an earlier time slot for Whovians, sorry, an earlier time slot for Doctor Who, which means now you've got an earlier time slot for Whovians on a Monday. Again, remember, Whovians is filmed, edited, and released on the same day. Because obviously, if they didn't do that, then they would have to make sure they would have to do NDAs every time they released like every time they filmed an episode on the Sunday or whatever, because it would be before it airs in the UK. So, look, I acknowledge that the ABC were kind of in this lose-lose position to begin with, but this was not the right call. And what's weird is that they do actually eventually choose better later on, but it's not now. And I think that's a big problem because you're going to this brand new era of the show. You know, most eyes are going to be watching this series in particular. They're not going to be watching series 12, right? Because, you know, series 11 wasn't really even shown to them. So, yeah, it's just, again, they were put in a bad spot and they chose the wrong move. As I was saying, Whovians is now airing on Monday 7:30, which means there's also a shorter turnaround between the filming and airing of it, which already is, you know, when they're already cutting it this close. Now, to be fair, I don't really know the logistics of how much time that they had between filming, editing, and airing. I'm gonna say it wasn't really a whole lot to work with, but you know, a lot of those editing gripes that you had in that first season, you kind of would hope would be, you know, cut down in the second season. Now they know what they were doing. But obviously, now that they've done this, what they had to do was push it back earlier, the filming. Again, it impacted the people that could even go to see the show now. Because we've gone from a Sunday afternoon to a Monday afternoon, right? And not just mid afternoon, we're talking 3 p.m., you know? So now there are less people going to the audience, and you kind of felt that a little bit when you actually got to those crowd interactions. Um, and then, of course, the other big issue was that now that Whovians is on it, the prime time 7:30 p.m., even if it's on ABC too, that also would have, you know, so people aren't watching Doctor Who at 5:55, and now we're getting to Whovians, which is on at prime time 7:30 p.m. People aren't watching the Doctor Who at 6 p.m. in the first place, and now they have no real incentive to watch the Whovians on the prime time weeknight showings. So, God, it's frustrating. Anyway, um, yeah. So, again, I understand ABC were dealt a bad hand, but everything that they chose was just wrong. Um, and then probably the other biggest issue, like the thing that was most noticeable from series one to series two, as I said, I made a big deal in series one that there was such a big collaboration between Stephen Moffat's, you know, crew running Doctor Who and the ABC. That was no longer the case. Um, there were no interviews with any of the people working whatsoever. And it kind of just feels like for them, they were just inherited something that they didn't really care about, which would be ironic because that would be the same thing that happens to the show to Doctor Who itself when we get there. And then, as I mentioned earlier, there was no Whovians episode to coincide with the New Year's Day special resolution, and as a result, people didn't know if that was it or not for Whovians. To be fair, I don't think the hosts knew either. To be fair, I think they knew when the ABC told them that they knew. So I don't know. There was a lot of up in the air speculation, which again is funny because Doctor Who itself would suffer the same fate. So anyway, let's combine the next. Let's combine Series 12, Whovian Series 3, and then Series 13 because it's kind of important to just condense it all. So, much to the surprise of everyone, Whovians did actually return in 2020. But what they did is that instead of airing alongside Spyfall Part 1, they chose to air Whovians alongside both parts combined together. How I thought they would do that for End of Time Part 1 and Part 2. But alas, they finally decided to do it with Series 12. Like the Series 3 of Whovians taking a look at both episodes together. As such, because New Year's Day was on a Thursday, they decided to air Doctor Who on 8 p.m. on a Thursday night, which is not as bad as airing it on a Monday, I will admit. But now you've gone from primetime dramas and reality shows on Monday nights to competing with sports on the Thursday night, in particular NRL. Granted, not everyone watches NRL, so there was a better chance of people watching Doctor Who on a Thursday 8 p.m. But again, you should have just done it on the Saturday or a Sunday. I don't know what the ABC was doing, but anyway. So Doctor Who aired at 8 p.m., which already is kind of late, and then Whovians would air at 9 p.m., which is kind of just. It kind of felt like the ABC didn't care at that point. 9 p.m. is just a death time slot, you know? Especially if, you know, Doctor Who is supposed to be family programming. 9 p.m. Kids are going to bed at 9 p.m. What are you doing, ABC? What are you doing? Why on earth did you think 9 p.m. was an acceptable time slot? Anyway, so Timeless Children, the finale of Series 12, would mark the end of Whovians because Whovians didn't come back for Revolution of the Daleks, and then the pandemic killed everything altogether. There was no chance that it was airing alongside Flux in an official capacity. To what I understand, there was an unofficial capacity. I think they did it via Zoom call. Not too sure about that. I wasn't aware of it at the time. Would have been cool, I assume, to just chat under lockdown. But anyway, um, and then Flux would return to the Monday schedule, but now they get the 7:30 p.m. slot in ABC2, which was the Whovians time slot back in 2018. So anyway, so that marked the first time that it didn't air on the main channel in its 50-year history. But then it would revert back to ABC for the remainder of the 2022 specials. Um, if you thought that was a mess, yes, it was. And the fate of Whovians is kind of very sad because it was almost none of its doing. It was almost everything surrounding it that went against it. It had one really good season that worked for it, and then kind of got shafted after that, and that's sad. I just think Whovians was a really special thing, and I think it really added to the element of the show as a whole. As I was pointing out with the silver screen stuff, Doctor Who is at its best when it's around when a bunch of Whovians are all together and they get to really embrace the highs and lows of the show. So yeah. Anyway, now we get to even more depressing talk. So let's go over it. So basically, 2023 would mark the end of the Doctor Who ABC partnership after 56 years together. Doctor Who with the BBC and the ABC, 56 years. Again, that was the point of mentioning the 1965 thing, right? Is just to go to show how tight knit this relationship between the show and the ABC was, that it was so conjoined that it was practically the entirety of its run together. But alas, with the Disney Plus deal, that was never going to be the case because Disney Plus had the exclusive um, distribution rights outside of the UK. How did that go for them? But anyway, alas, it's funny to chalk it up in hindsight how poor of an idea this was. But let's talk about how Disney Plus benefited Australia, because in some ways it did, in some ways it didn't. So each of the 60th anniversary specials all aired at 5:30 a.m. and then Church and Ruby Road aired at 5 a.m. on Boxing Day. Joy to the World was 10 past 4 for some reason. That's the thing. These, you'd think with like Disney having the sole control over when these episodes aired, they could be a bit more consistent. What is this shit? 5:30, 4:55, 4:10, 11 a.m., 7 p.m. Like, can you have some consistency, Disney, please? For God's sake. Anyway, so yeah, Joy to the World is 4:10. Season 1. God, it gives me an aneurysm. Series 14 aired on Sundays at 11 a.m., which was really cool for us because it meant that it was on at an actual reasonable time. We get to really watch it alongside everyone else. And then Season 2 aired at Saturday at 7 p.m. So we've gone from Sundays, again, back to Saturdays for a whole season, and it was at 7 p.m. And that's fantastic. I mean, it was to the detriment of the people in the UK because it was more US oriented, the scheduling, but hey, Australia finally didn't get screwed over for a change, which was nice. Well, I say that, and then the reality wall goes back to Sunday at 3:50 because of the regeneration. It's just so frustrating. Anyway, obviously, after those 2 seasons and War Between the Land and the Sea, that marked the end of the Disney Doctor Who deal, and Disney chose not to renew. So now, more uncertainty exists because of the future of the show. Because obviously, BBC will have the sole control in the UK, but who knows what's going to happen now? So now that Disney are out, whether Disney go back, sorry, whether BBC go to another streaming service, although I don't know if you struggle to go with the biggest streaming platform on that exists, where on earth are you going to go from there? Like, aren't you going to have the same issues as before? Or do you revert to going back to the ABC? I don't know. I think I think even the BBC isn't fully sure yet. I think the RTT2 era, the Whoniverse era, was so poorly thought out in hindsight that I think the BBC and Russell T Davies thought, yes, done deal. We'll do the 2 seasons and the spin-off show, and Disney will renew, and it's all good. I don't think they ever saw this coming, and yeah, I think we're in limbo now. We don't know what's going on, and I don't think we'll know until probably September, the earliest, because obviously the Christmas special is the last thing that Russell was contracted to write. So we'll see how that all goes. But yeah, it just kind of feels like Australia, when it comes to watching Doctor Who, is just a mess. You know, I think there was a really good thing going where it was Sunday nights because there was practically no competition, and Doctor Who got to really shine, and Whovians got to really shine, and yeah, it's just a mess. So TLDR, for those people that struggle to follow along, congrats! Now you know what it's like to be a Doctor Who fan in Australia. The scheduling is that consistently inconsistent, and yet we have one of the most die-hard core fan bases, like, globally. And yeah, this presentation more comes out of frustration. This felt like a vent of sorts. It just Doctor Who could be this amazing global thing that it once was back in 2013 and 2014. We could get back to that if we really wanted to. But alas, that is no longer the case. And it's sad, you know? I just kind of hope that we get to really. I mean, I get to reminisce on when Doctor Who was at its best, and part of me hopes that we can get back to that time. But until then, that wraps up this presentation of sorts. I hope to talk about something a lot less depressing than this presentation, but I also hope to talk about more Doctor Who in the future, because, as I said, Doctor Who is a big part of my interests, and I have a lot to say about it. So much so that I did a podcast about back in the day. So, yeah, stay tuned for that. Thank you so much for watching it. I will take questions before we go, just to wrap it up. Yeah, it kind of really was a cinema feeling, before each of the episodes started. It was just really cool, like, getting to experience the highs and lows, especially in Series 10. You know, like there were a lot of quite exciting moments. The Australian reveal in the pilot, the Doctor going blind in Oxygen, obviously the Sim reveal. By the way, if anyone tells you that the Sim reveal being shown in the next time trailer ruined it, I'm literal proof that that's bullshit because I have national television proof, like suggesting otherwise. Um, yeah, Series 10 was just really cool. They really understood, when those hype moments were justified in a way that I feel like has kind of been lacking since. Um, yeah, no, it was the full Twice Upon a Time episode um, up until the regeneration. Like Capaldi does his speech, and then it hard cuts. We don't see who Capaldi regenerates into, even though we know it's Jodie Whittaker. We don't see anything from the moment that he blows up. Yeah, yeah. Look, I know the ABC were in a bad place, like stuck between a rock and a hard place when it came to Series 11. But I just kind of feel like when you're starting a new era, you know, the first female doctor, brand new showrunner, new approach, you kind of want to put your best foot forward. And I just don't understand why they thought choosing Monday afternoon was the right call to release the episodes. I don't get it, and I think it played a factor in both the demise of Doctor Who on the ABC and Whovians itself. So yeah, what else? Yeah, Crispy and I we go way back. As I said, like we met. Well, we spoke a bit before. Um, when I did the podcast back in the day, when Crispy was doing his YouTube channel, it was around that time. So we crossed paths. We have also a mutual friend. So I've known him for quite a long time. Whovians was the first time I ever got to meet him in person, and he would come down to watch. Um, and yeah, it was really cool. He's such a great guy, and the fact that I was just like, hey, I'm gonna doing a Whovians talk. Do you want to contribute a bit to it? And he was like, absolutely. I was like, okay, cool, cool. And he just threw that for me. I did a bit of editing to clean it up, and there we go. So yeah, big thank you again to Crispy for doing that. Much appreciated. Um, yeah, I mean, after shows existed before and after Whovians. I don't understand. I guess a lot of those after shows were kind of like not pre-recorded necessarily, but they didn't have the live studio audience element, and I think that really kind of elevated it in a way because you know the reactions were organic. You didn't have to manufacture anything. A lot of it was one take. Um, oh, Daniel Nannheim's fantastic. Yeah, yeah. We did a huge talk afterwards, and he was so generous at this time. So grateful to actually get to meet him and talk about because like I think Extremis is one of the best shows. Sorry, one of the best episodes of the show. Period. Like the fact that he was responsible for that was really cool. Um, yeah. Anyway, as I was saying, I think Whovians could definitely exist nowadays. If it was to come back to the ABC, I think Whovians is a possibility. I think it'd be nice if the scheduling would work out in its favor for a change. The scheduling didn't really work until for 2017 and no time after that. So I think it'd be really cool if we went back to the whole Sunday scheduling. Got to really enjoy the Sunday afternoon Whovians recordings and all that. Especially nowadays, I think they can make a big deal about you know the return of Doctor Who on ABC again. It'd be really cool. Um, do I think it's going to happen? Probably not. I think I've heard Netflix is rumored to be the next stream partner they go with. Um, Honestly, I kind of think Paramount would be a better choice. They already have Star Trek, and I think they respect their IPs a little bit more than Netflix do. So, yeah, honestly, I would probably go Paramount Plus, but obviously Netflix is like the big streaming service that isn't Disney Plus. So I kind of understand if they do go that route, but personally, I kind of want to bypass streaming as a whole. Not because I don't see the merit in it necessarily, but I just think I don't know. I think Doctor Who doesn't deserve to be behind a paywall. Obviously, the Disney deal came with a bigger budget, and you could see that for better or worse. But yeah, I don't know. I think the ABC is just such a. If there was a way where it could be on both, I think that'd be the most ideal. But I just think that the ABC is just such an institution to go with Doctor Who that I kind of feel sad that, you know, after 56 years, they were just like, bye, thanks for all the memories. Yeah, Ron Grainer really was Australian. Yeah, the Doctor Who composer. Um, yeah. All right, I'm gonna end it there. Thank you so much for tuning into this thing. I will hope to try and do something like this again, maybe in a month or so. Just, just whatever, whatever I feel like talking about. You know, maybe it's gaming, maybe it's Doctor Who, maybe it's something different altogether. Who knows? Who knows? But yeah, until then, thank you so much. Peace.